Good morning. I'm going to talk about some practical experience which is consistent with the ideas which Eve has just presented, and I think particularly with parts of the ideas presented yesterday morning by Don Tapscott. But I should begin with a warning. The story I'm going to tell you is about a model that would be regarded as maverick in the world of government, regarded as an outlier, divergent from a remarkably consistent global practice in terms of what's generally done. So is that a paradox, that the proposition should be so consistent with sets of ideas discussed here, but regarded as so much of an outlier in the external world to which it applies? Or is that exactly what we should expect at a moment of transition in our understanding of how the world of the public sector deals with complexity? So I'm going to give you an outline description of the process of change in one country, of whole government change in one country. And I should probably say one thing at this point. You will not hear the word airport cross my lips. This is not a story about what I do now. It's a story of what I spent a big chunk of my life doing in the recent past. It's a story about a country in which an analysis within government of the need for greater strategic agility, for a better response to complex challenges, led to substantial changes in the approach to government. The country is Scotland, with a population of 5 million, and since 1999, a devolved government and parliament within the United Kingdom. The key element of the changes took place in 2007. So that's approximately halfway through the life of this new constitutional framework created in 1999, and by coincidence, halfway through the time during which I was the senior official within Scotland's central government structure. But more significantly, the fact that it was 2007 means that we can reflect back on 6 years of consequences of having made the change. Need to go a bit further back in the story, though. The change had its origins in reflections on the limitations to the success of the model for effective government, which had been developed over the post-war years in the UK and in varying degrees across the rest of the world. A model which Eve has just described very clearly down in the bottom left-hand corner of his chart of progression, the simple and efficient model. The thing I would emphasize about that is the degree to which the model is built on fragmentation of tasks and organizations. And that fragmentation became effectively a guiding principle under the new public management which Eve has described. So one way of understanding the changes I shall outline for you is as the substitution of integration for fragmentation as the central principle in the organization and operation of government. Or in other words, the substitution of willingness to try to understand the full scope of complex challenges for that more traditional approach of responding to complex challenges by seeking to reduce them to a series of smaller, more manageable tasks. A second potential paradox in this story is that in terms of conventional measures of success of that dominant model of approach to government, government in Scotland appeared to be operating outstandingly well before the change. The programme of commitments which the government of Scotland had set out following the 2003 election had been more than 95% delivered by 2006, and the range of detailed performance targets across various public services, characteristic of new public management, were being met. So it looked like an organisation at the top of its game. So why? Why make radical changes in those circumstances? Because assessing the evidence from a different perspective led to different, less favourable conclusions. There were important strategic objectives which had been pursued consistently for several decades, but which showed evidence either of deterioration in outcomes, and health inequalities would be the striking example of that, standstill, for example, on comparative rates of economic growth, or, at best, a degree of progress which would leave substantial unmet needs for a long period, for example, on the levels of educational achievement of the bottom 30% of young people. And I hope you'll notice in those examples a tendency to veer towards the point that Eve has made about the need for government to deal with the problems of the citizens that are least welcome as challenges. There was also evidence from polling returns, opinion poll returns, that citizens considered that the major change in political framework, which had occurred in 1999 with the creation of devolved government, was not delivering economic and social changes which met their expectation of improved progress compared to previous decades. That's not to say that things weren't getting better, but the degree to which they were getting better wasn't matching citizen expectations. So another feature of the circumstances preceding change in 2007 was that two separate groups of people looking at the same body of evidence but from different perspectives came to similar and consistent conclusions. The main opposition political party came to the conclusion that political commitments should be framed in different terms, in a different language, and that ministers in government should operate genuinely as a team, which they understood would be more novel in practice than it would seem from the claims widely made by ministerial teams around the world. My senior civil service colleagues, my top 80 or so people, came to the conclusion that the barrier to past achievement of a number of key strategic objectives was systemic, rather than a matter of policy or of quality of execution or of resourcing. And they engaged in a sustained process of analysis, which was characterized by willingness to learn from the ways in which the organization had not achieved success, rather than continue to approach analysis from the starting assumption that past success must be extendable to different circumstances from those in which it had been achieved. So both groups came to the conclusion that change was vital in tackling the challenges of the future, as well as in reaching a greater level of impact on long-standing strategic challenges. I asked myself what the nature of the systemic problem was. I perhaps slightly preceded my colleagues in coming to the conclusion myself that the issue was systemic rather than specific to the range of issues. I came to the conclusion that it was the existence of inherent barriers to integration of both policy thinking and service delivery. I looked at the evidence of the impact of past efforts to tackle those barriers, to pursue what's commonly called joined-up government. And I had direct experience of many of those techniques for dealing with the problem. But it seemed to me clear from the evidence that they'd proved inadequate, that whatever the answer was, it wasn't the things that had been tried in the past. And so I concluded that the systemic problem could only be overcome by redefining core aspects of the organisation and functioning of the civil service and the wider public sector. So the change made in Scotland in 2007 in response to this evidence and these two analyses can be summed up as the adoption of a model of government as a single organisation, in contrast to the model of a federation of organisations, which is more or less universal around the world, the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Justice, the Ministry of Finance, etc., etc., etc. Of a single outcomes-based strategic framework for the entire public sector. One strategic framework for everybody. In slightly more vivid language, that might be described as redefining the purpose of government and abolishing government departments as an organisational concept. It produced what I've learned from those outside Scotland to call the Scottish model of government, which isn't replicated elsewhere at present, hence the point about it being an outlier, but which some national governments are currently considering whether to adopt. And the strategic framework that sits at the heart of this has been described by Joseph Stiglitz as one of the three leading examples in the world of the post-Sarkozy Commission approach to defining national success. The execution of the change was rapid. The timescale for introducing the main elements of this radical change within central government was only a few weeks. Before the next financial year had begun, the changes in central government had been extended to include a fundamental renegotiation of the relationship between central and local government, which brought local government within the same single strategic framework as national government was operating to. Has it worked? Where's the beef? What does the 6 years tell us? I'll offer you three tests. First, has there been better progress towards the strategic outcomes? The evidence from the rigorous performance framework, which sits alongside the strategic framework, which you can judge for yourselves by looking at the Scotland Performs website, shows a strong level of success despite the unwelcome intervention of the global financial crisis. Second, has it worked politically, as all changes in government must do if they're to survive? The government which made the changes enjoyed at the next election not only improved results, but a level of political success previously considered unachievable by any political party in the Scottish electoral system. And third, has it worked organisationally? Although neither I nor any of my senior team who led the change in 2007 are still there, our successors have intensified the change, moved further towards the model rather than moved away from it. And crucially, younger rising leaders have proved to be its most committed advocates, and they've created a peer network that has driven it forward right across the range of government functions. A strong example of the power of networks to enable change, which we discussed yesterday. Thank you.